My boyfriend ended his life after I cheated and left him. My therapist suggested that I write down and share what happened to me over the past year. It took numerous edits and rewrites to get this into a coherent story. I used to be a decent writer, but I'm out of practice. This forum was recommended by a friend as a place to confess, seek penance, and share a warning. I know many will despise me for what I did and the consequences that followed. But if my story can prevent even one person from making the same mistakes, it's worth the backlash. I am a 28F, and I was in a relationship with a wonderful man, William. 8 months ago, William discovered that I had been cheating on him. A few days later, he ended his life. Even typing those words feels surreal and revolting. I crushed the heart of the man I loved since we were children, and he couldn't endure the pain of my betrayal. For those thinking I don't deserve to be breathing, you're probably right. I've attempted to end my life twice since then, but for some reason, I'm still here. William and I grew up together. I can't remember a time when I didn't know him. We were in the same Sunday school classes, attended the same public schools, and our families were friends long before we came along. William was always kind, even when kids could be mean. I realized I liked him in 6th grade, but it wasn't until high school that we officially became a couple. We were each other's first love, first kiss, and first everything. After graduation, we took a year to get stable jobs and then decided to get married. We were planning to have children and had even picked out their names. We were each other's first and only lovers. Our bond was strong, and we spent every moment we could together. But I threw it all away for something cheap and meaningless. I didn't consider that a friendship with another man could lead to emotional attachment. William and I had a strong relationship, but no relationship is bulletproof. Our relationship seemed perfect on the outside. We spent quarantine together during the pandemic, making the most of it. We watched movies in bed, cooked for each other, and acted like kids. We joked about how other couples were struggling to spend time together, while we couldn't get enough of each other. Yet, I cheated on that man. The affair was with a man I'll call Paul, a lacrosse coach at the school where I taught English. We met during group Zoom meetings. Initially, I found him brash and smug. When we finally met in person, there was no attraction, at least not from me. Paul was engaged, and I was happily married. Our interactions were professional and devoid of any flirtation. When Paul's engagement fell apart due to his fiancée's infidelity, he began to vent to me. Our conversations were intellectual, discussing topics like race, politics, and religion. Nothing flirtatious or sexual. I even helped him edit his wedding speeches, never imagining it would lead to anything more. But when William went out of town for work, Paul and I started spending more time together. What began as innocent texting turned into grabbing drinks and dinner. One day, I sprained my ankle, and Paul helped me bandage it. That's when I noticed he was aroused. A kiss followed, and though I initially pushed him away, we ended up making out. I was in disbelief. I didn't plan for it to happen, and I was certain Paul didn't either. I debated whether to tell William immediately or wait until he returned. But Paul convinced me to keep it to myself to avoid causing William stress. Instead, our meetings became more frequent. We had dinner, drinks, and eventually ended up in bed together. The moment it happened, I knew my relationship with William was over. I wrote a letter to William, planning to confess when he returned. But he discovered my affair before I could tell him. He found texts between Paul and me. He confronted me, packed his bags, and left. I tried to contact him, but he ignored my calls and texts. 2 nights later, at 3:17 a.m., there was a knock on the door. When I saw the police, I knew what had happened. They told me William had ended his life. The grief and guilt overwhelmed me. I was sedated for days and wasn't even allowed to attend his funeral. I wanted to visit William's grave but didn't know where his parents had buried him. They had every right to keep it from me. I attempted to end my life that night but failed. I've been hospitalized twice for attempts. My family is disgusted by my actions but still loves me. Their disappointment and shame will never end, and it shouldn't. William's family, on the other hand, hates me. They blamed me entirely for his death and cut off all contact. They made it clear that I wasn't welcome at the funeral or any family gatherings. His sister, who was my best friend growing up, sent me a message saying she never wanted to see me again. That hurt deeply, but I knew I deserved it. My affair wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was filled with awkward moments and guilt. Paul was nothing like William. He wasn't as kind, intelligent, or loving. I found myself comparing them constantly, and Paul always fell short. Paul and I didn't even stay in touch after William's death. He wasn't worth it. He didn't care about me or my feelings. He was just there, a distraction for my problems. Paul moved on quickly, finding another woman to entertain his ego. He didn't attend William's funeral or reach out to offer condolences. I'm trying to move on, but it's hard. I see a therapist twice a week, and I'm working through my feelings. I've met someone through my therapist who's helping me. She set a fire as a prank that got out of control and caused deaths. We talk about our guilt and how to live with it. Life with my new boyfriend, Alex, is different. He knows about my past and what happened with William. We met at a support group for people dealing with grief and guilt. Alex lost his brother to a car accident caused by a drunk driver. We bonded over our shared pain and the burden of guilt. Alex is kind and understanding, but there's always a shadow hanging over our relationship. He's patient with me, but I often see the worry in his eyes. He's afraid I'll hurt him the way I hurt William. I've tried to assure him that I've learned from my mistakes, but trust is hard to rebuild. We spend a lot of time talking about our pasts and our feelings. Alex encourages me to be open and honest about my emotions. He wants to help me heal, but he also knows that I have to do most of the work myself. He's supportive but careful not to enable my self-pity. Rebuilding my life after William's death has been a slow and painful process. I had to move out of our home because it was filled with too many memories. I found a small apartment in the city, closer to my therapist and support group. It's not much, but it's a fresh start. I'm trying to find meaning in my life again. I volunteer at a local shelter, helping women who are escaping abusive relationships. It's a way to give back and make a positive impact, even if it's just a small one. The women I work with don't know my story, and I prefer it that way. I don't want their pity or judgment. I've also started writing again. It's a way to process my emotions and find some clarity. I'm working on a memoir about my relationship with William and what led to his death. It's a painful project, but I hope it will help others understand the consequences of betrayal. Alex and I are taking things slow. We're not living together, and we don't have any immediate plans for the future. We're just trying to be there for each other and support each other's healing. It's not a perfect relationship, but it's a start. The reactions from friends and colleagues were mixed. Some cut ties with me immediately after William's death. They couldn't forgive what I had done and didn't want to be associated with me. Others were more understanding, knowing that people make mistakes. They offered support but kept their distance. My closest friends tried to be there for me, but it was difficult. Our conversations were strained, and there was always an elephant in the room. They didn't know what to say or how to help me. I appreciated their efforts, but I often felt more isolated than ever.